Hello everyone, I'm SnakeEyes and I'm glad to welcome you back for the second episode of the History of Space Simulators. Get ready to explore a fascinating period of this genre, one that took shape throughout the 1990s. The 90s were a crucial decade for technological progress and marked a time of rapid evolution for the growing video game industry. Back then, the development process was very different from what it is today. What began in small studios with tight-knit teams gradually shifted toward a more complex structure, influenced by many of the factors we still see today: economic pressure, technical challenges, new distribution methods, relentless technological advancement, and even changing consumer preferences. In short, the result was an industrial and market landscape in constant, fast-paced transformation. Within this context, PC gaming, unlike consoles, thrived thanks to several niche genres, one of which was space sims. This genre attracted a loyal and important group of consumers in the industry at that time. The technology and platforms used in these games were aimed at an audience raised on shoot-'em-ups and the sci-fi films of the 70s and 80s. Movies like Star Wars, The Last Starfighter, or Star Trek helped create the perfect environment for these titles to grow. At the same time, the arrival of the internet in the 90s signaled the decline of arcades, leading, through a natural evolution, to a home-based video game experience. It was also the beginning of the Great Console War, and most families already had computers at home, giving way to personal connectivity and, of course, online gaming. Honestly, I can't hide how exciting this era is to revisit and share with you. So, lights, camera, action. Let's begin the golden age of space simulators with the analysis of the Wing Commander Saga. As the decade began, right in 1990, Origin Systems already had a solid formula in place with their latest game, Space Rogue, but what looked like the beginning of a new franchise quickly evolved into something far more ambitious, a cornerstone that would become one of the historical foundations of the space simulation and combat genre, Wing Commander. Chris Roberts emerged as a young game director, creating the franchise that would launch him to fame. The game's development originally started under the name Squadron, which was intended to be its final title. However, due to the game's theme and internal changes, it was renamed Wing Leader midway through development. It wasn't until the final stages, just before its release, that the team settled on the title Wing Commander. At launch, the game was released for PC-DOS, but in the years that followed, it was ported to multiple platforms including Amiga, Amiga CD32, Sega CD, Super Nintendo, 3DO, Sony PlayStation, Game Boy Advance, and Mac OS. Wing Commander redefined the space combat genre, standing apart from its competition like no game had done before. Its biggest strength was the creation of a cinematic experience, a narrative-rich environment designed to immerse the player completely. It allowed for interactions with other characters in the game and included scenes such as takeoff and landing sequences. Every element worked toward drawing the player deeper into the story and making them feel like part of the evolving game world. In its story, the player, as the main character, piloted various starfighters in an effort to save humanity from the Kilrathi, a feline alien race at war with humans. It was a military sci-fi story filled with epic moments, structured in a semi-linear fashion, with key decision points that added a slight dynamic flow to the narrative. It didn't take long for the next installment to arrive. Building on the success of its predecessor, Wing Commander 2 introduced technical improvements while retaining the core mechanics of the original. This time, the in-game simulation offered more variety in its visuals. The cinematic scenes featured more animation, resulting in a more polished final product, one that would eventually evolve into the blockbuster format used in its later sequels. With the first two titles in the series becoming a sensation, Origin seized the opportunity and launched its first spin-off 2 years later, but this time without Chris Roberts. In 1993, Wing Commander Privateer, commonly known as Privateer, kicked off a new branch within the franchise. It pushed the graphical engine to its limits. It built a game with greater depth, maintaining the franchise's hallmark space combat, while also expanding it with elements that had already contributed to the success of classics like Elite. In Privateer, players were given the ability to travel through a universe that, while limited, was large enough to offer freedom, allowing them to trade, hunt bounties, or become pirates. Privateer took full advantage of everything the franchise had already established. It skillfully blended the right new ingredients while still preserving the traditional Wing Commander story arcs. In 1993, Origin released Wing Commander Academy, a standalone entry designed for quick, customizable space combat. Unlike the main storyline games, it focused entirely on fast-paced missions, allowing players to create their scenarios, choose ships, and test different tactics. It became a fan favorite for those who wanted instant action without the narrative commitment of the main series. 1 year later, Origin released Wing Commander Armada. It was an attempt to experiment with the franchise, shifting focus to a multiplayer space combat experience infused with strategic conquest elements. The game featured head-to-head battles, cooperative play, and turn-based strategy. And while Origin continued to milk a dated Wing Commander spin-off formula, Chris Roberts brewed, in the background, a much higher-budgeted technological production, Wing Commander 3. This time, the ambition pushed boundaries, and the game featured real actors performing scenes that drove the story forward. The interaction with characters and hours of live-action footage posed a serious technical challenge, all of which had to be fit into just 3 CDs. The revolution wasn't just about cinematic presentation. Players could now make key decisions that altered the protagonist's path, resulting in different possible endings. At the same time, the graphics engine evolved, with 3D visuals that matched, and even surpassed briefly, the competition. The final delivered product was unmatched at the time. Wing Commander 4 followed just a year later in 1995. It expanded and perfected every aspect of the game. It reached a remarkable level of visual and technical artistry with a production budget of over $10 million, covering actors, sets, and graphical development. However, the decision to remove the cockpit interiors from the ships sparked backlash from both critics and longtime fans. Meanwhile, the sequel to Privateer, titled Privateer 2: The Darkening, was developed in 1996 by Chris Roberts' brother, Erin Roberts. It featured all the core elements of the later Wing Commander games, prominent actors, extensive full-motion video sequences, and a cutting-edge graphics engine. For some, the game bore a distinctly European flavor, which set it apart stylistically and narratively from the rest of the franchise. Eventually, the Wing Commander saga came to a close in 1997 with Wing Commander Prophecy, the 5th and final official entry in the main series. This title didn't innovate much and was released during a particularly difficult time. The game faced increasing competition, shrinking budgets, and landed near the bottom of the franchise in terms of fan appreciation. All the Wing Commander games became part of a saga that evolved tremendously, in parallel with the rapid growth of the PC gaming market. As entertainment hardware advanced at breakneck speed, Chris Roberts made a bold bet that games had to spearhead this evolution. A film, an animated series, and ports to consoles were produced, but the 90s were also filled with many equally relevant games outside of Origin Systems' domain. In the next episode, we'll leave the Wing Commander universe behind and explore some of its greatest challenges. We'll dive into Star Wars space combat with the legendary Totally Games series, X-Wing, TIE Fighter, and beyond. We'll experience the epic battles of Free Space and Free Space 2 from Volition, and take a look at high-speed action in titles like Terminal Velocity, Descent, and many more. Join me as we complete the landscape of this journey through the golden age of space simulators. Until then, thank you for watching this video. Fly safe and see you out there.